Good morning, Stacy. Everything is ready to go when you are.
Good morning, Kathy. Thanks so much. All right, it is 8 o'clock on this beautiful sunny morning, Wednesday morning. I will call Public Safety and Health Committee to order. It does look like we have enough members for a quorum. I hope everyone is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed today for a marathon day of meetings. First order of business, we obviously are still continuing to meet remotely, and I feel as though I have said the spiel enough times that most people know how to participate and continue to engage with us on City Council. But the best way to go to the one-stop shop is to visit the city website at www.ci.missoula.mt.us/webcast, and that will be your hub for joining future meetings, leaving public comment, and finding the links to attend council committee meetings, as well as city council Monday or night meetings if you do not want to come to the hybrid in-person option. We will start today with a roll. Kathy, if you wouldn't mind doing that for us. We'll give
Starting roll call. Stacy Anderson.
Present.
Daniel Carlino.
Present.
John Contos. Mirta Becerra. Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Kristen Jordan.
Present.
Mike Nugent.
Present.
Jennifer Savage.
Present.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica. Heidi West. Roll call complete, 4 absent.
Thanks so much. Great. Well, we do have a quorum for this morning, and we do have minutes to approve from our last public safety and operations meeting, which was held on April 13th. Are there any additions or edits to the minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. We have 3 items on our agenda today. And the first one is now that we have sort of changed up committee schedules and public safety is also public safety, health and operations, we will now hear from Scott Colwell about the purchase of a single axle grapple truck. And I do believe Scott's here. Thought I saw him. Could have been imagining things.
He just needs to be upgraded to panelist.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I was moving in that direction. Scott, are you with us now?
There I am.
Hello, good morning.
Oh. Good morning, committee and the Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak this morning. So I have one item today, as was mentioned. It's just the purchase of one single axle dump truck for Parks Department Urban Forestry. So I would move that this committee and the council approve the purchase and authorize the release of the bid bond for one Freightliner M2106 with a Fosse F145AZ grapple crane from Custom Truck and Equipment of Kansas City, Missouri. That purchase price is $147,675.00. That includes delivery to Missoula. We did send this unit out for nationwide bids. We received multiple responses from different vendors, but only one vendor actually bid it. And that was specifically most likely because it was a used vehicle, or we were asking for a used vehicle up to a new vehicle. But the stipulation was it was available to be delivered to the city of Missoula within 20 days of purchase. So not too many people can meet that spec. There was 3 bidders that could, but only one bidder submitted a bid. This purchase was a new request on the CIP. It's been on the CIP for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years, and we finally came up with a bid spec that everybody kind of liked, and so this year we actually went out for purchase on it. We did have $150,000 budgeted for this. Part of that budget comes directly from Parks Department's budget, operating budget. The other part of that comes from CIP. Again, there was $150,000 budgeted. It comes in under budget by $2,325. Again, I just asked for the approval on this and release of the bid bond.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. That all seems pretty straightforward. And I have a hand raised from Ms. Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. And I know that this purchase was, or this item last year on budget was going to be really important for urban forest. I can't remember exactly what a grapple truck is, but I remember that we had some discussion around it, and that we were, the urban forestry department was really happy to that this got approved as a new item. So I'm happy to make the recommended motion. I would love to hear again what a grapple truck is, because I kind of know, but I'm not totally sure.
Thanks
Okay,
much,
so a
Ms.
grapple
Cheryl.
truck is a truck that picks up the logs and the brush after the urban forestry have actually done any kind of work. So a lot of times early spring, we'll get those snowfalls and they'll break off a lot of branches or break down trees, and the urban forestry crew is tasked with having to clean it up. And in past, what they've had to do is just manually labor. They cut these trees up into little pieces and try pretty much manhandle them in the back of pickup trucks and that kind of stuff. Where a grapple truck has a boom on it. You've probably seen a logging truck loader that has a self-loader on it. That's pretty much what a grapple truck is, except for it doesn't have a stake bed on the back of it. It has like a box so that they can load log pieces and brush into that, and that's what the grapple truck actually does.
Thanks.
Great, thanks so much. So Ms. Cheryl's motion is in order. We have now Ms. Jones.
Thanks. I remember when we were doing this last summer in the budget, and I was pretty excited then about it. And I'm glad we're getting this done. We probably could have used it 3 weeks ago when there were a lot of branches and trees down around town, but oh well, we're getting there. And we always talk about the urban forest, how much we need to do with our urban forest. It's a big hill to climb, but we just kind of keep chipping away at it periodically with our budgets, where we add capacity in different ways. And this is one of those. So Donna talked about how this is really going to help with tree removal in general. So they have more capacity. So I'm excited about it. Thanks for bringing it to us, Scott.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Ms. Jones, for your comments. And I do, yes, remember how excited, it's the small things in life really that our various departments get excited about. So I do want to note for the record that Ms. Becerra has joined us. So we do not have any public in attendance for today, so I don't need to call for a public comment on this particular item. We do have a motion on the floor. Without any further comment or questions from council members, we will now move to a vote on approving this item. Kathy, can you go ahead and take that vote for us?
Starting vote. Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Daniel Carlino,
Yes.
Mirta Becerra,
I will pass because I was tardy.
okay. Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Kristen Jordan,
Yes.
Mike Nugent,
Yes.
Jennifer Savage,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
The vote passes 8 yes, 1 abstain.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks everything for Scott. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, so we have 2 more items on our agenda. The next one is it's brought to us by Ms. Cheryl as our representative to the Health Board, and it is amendments to the City Missoula Valley Air Quality District Ordinance. I will turn it over to Ms. Cheryl, and I do see several folks from the City County Health Department on the line who I am guessing will be giving more context for this particular item.
Yeah, are we doing the water first, or are we doing the air? Which one did you want to do it in a different order?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say I'm trying to
They are.
do it all in one screen. So yes, item 3.2 is amendments to the Missoula Valley Water Quality District Ordinance.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you, and happy to talk about this as part of the health board. But I think it would be if Ben is here. Who's doing this one? Let's see.
I'm here, Todd. I can talk about that.
Okay.
Looks like Todd is here.
I was looking for who was here. Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Todd, take it away.
Okay, thanks. Can everybody hear me okay?
You could be a little louder.
Be a little louder. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm excited to talk about this. This is a project that's been a long time in the making. So I've been with the Water Quality District for about 5 years now, and this was on the to-do list when I showed up. So I'll just get right into it here. So the Water Quality Ordinance. Let's see, there we go. I'm going to just give a little bit of background because this is an old ordinance. This is a revision, but this ordinance has been in effect for quite a while. I'm going to hit on just a couple of the, the main positives and some of the reasons why we need to change the ordinance, and then go over a general scope of the changes we're looking to make this time around. But it has to start, any discussion about our ordinance and rules about water quality have to start with a discussion about our aquifer. Everyone knows that we get 100% of our drinking water from Missoula's aquifer. It's our sole source of drinking water. We have these very permeable gravel and sands that provide, an abundant amount of water for us. The unfortunate and kind of other side of that coin, though, is those same gravel and sands make our aquifer really susceptible to contamination. So anything that happens above ground can go below ground, and basically our wells just serve as drinking straws, more or less, to our aquifer. And so if we have a contamination event in the Rattlesnake or somewhere in town, eventually that's going to move through our drinking water. And so how do we protect that? It's us. We are the protection. We can't rely on any natural protection underground. So we're the protection. Our behaviors, our infrastructure that we invest in, and those kinds of things serve as protection. And this ordinance serves as protection. This ordinance and the BMPs in here basically get everybody on the same page and help everybody protect this resource, because it's everybody's resource. It's not just one entity's responsibility. But we haven't always protected it. We've had a lot of problems, especially in the early 80s and 90s with contamination. So some of these are history now. We forgot about them, but it's because they've been cleaned up, and we've had big success with dry cleaners and with auto shops and their floor drains and disposal of perchloroethylene and degreasers. We still see fuel spills and problems with contamination of our groundwater. But basically this sets the stage. We realized at this time in history that we needed to do more. We needed to do more above ground to protect it. And so that really set the regulatory stage. In 1991, the state established a statute that allowed formation of water quality districts. And so today, and just like back then, that's our goal, is to protect and preserve the groundwater and surface water in Missoula as a district. And so we formed in 93, and then this ordinance that we're looking to update was established in 94. It's kind of unique because it's a municipal code, but it's also applicable outside the city limits as a health related code. And so over time, those boundaries do change. You can see in this map, the blue boundary is the water quality district boundary. So that roughly represents our aquifer boundary. And then the hash marks, that's our actual ordinance boundary. So that's where we would.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but if you're trying to share, you need to share your screen so we can see the map and hash marks that you're referencing.
Oh, did it take it off? Okay. Have you been able to see any screens up till now?
No, I thought we were just giving background. And so it wasn't until you started
Awesome.
referencing a map that I was like,
Thank you so much.
guessing he has a presentation.
How about now?
No.
That screen. Nothing?
Nope, not yet.
Oh, okay.
And you should have sharing screen capability because you're in the meeting as a
Yeah. About that. This, yeah, I'm seeing here that it looks like my screen too is being shared, but it looks like it's not being transmitted to you. Let me.
yes, because it looks like all panelists can share from my end. Ah, something's happening. Here we go.
Am I screen sharing? You are screen sharing.
We can see it now, Todd, the map.
Oh, great.
It's on slide 8 of the 28, it looks like.
Oh, I see. So it's not sharing.
We can see, it looks like we can see your screen. But we also can see the next, the note section, which isn't a big deal. I mean, oh, they're perfect.
Sorry about that. I think I'm more used to Teams, but
That's quite all right.
You can see the screen, full screen now.
Yes, we see a map with an outline and hash
Awesome.
marks. So
Okay.
you can pick up where you left off. Sorry about that.
Great. I'm so glad you said something. Okay, so our last major update with this ordinance was back in 2000, and we added De-Icer regulations back then. But for the most part, our current ordinance, when it in terms of specific industries, it really talks about those that apply De-Icers, bulk petroleum facilities. So those would be like Phillips 66, the really large ones, and regular gas stations, and then more or less dry cleaners and the prohibition on using perchloroethylene. So that was also updated in 2008 for some more De-Icer additions. But for the most part, our big prohibition in our ordinance is don't cause pollution. Don't put any waste where it could cause pollution. And so, that's been a great piece of code. It's actually a little more restrictive than State Water Quality Act, because in the State Water Quality Act, it says don't place anything where it may cause contamination or where it will cause, and we say may. But what we've seen, in the past 20 years is, as great as that is, it's not very specific. So, we get complaints about, kind of like in this picture here, someone dumped their drywall mud or their paint wash water in a storm drain. And so we respond to those complaints and then communicate how not to do that in the future, how not to pollute. So here's what you should do. Here's a best management practice. So it's always after the fact. And so really with this revision, these these best management practices and rules that we want to incorporate aren't really new, and they're not even really new to the industry, honestly. We just want to communicate them on the front end. We want to be better at customer service. We think that these folks want to do the right thing, but they don't know how to do the right thing. And so we're gonna let them know. And so then there were other problems with the ordinance in terms of some outdated references to other codes and some definitions to change. So, and there's got a lot of good things about the code that we didn't change. So we moved things around though to make it clearer to the reader, more clear to the reader. So those were the main goals of the revision, and that's where we hope to be. We really started this in earnest right before the pandemic in 2020, early 2020, and started with our partners and Water Quality Advisory Council folks. And we kind of picked it up more recently and have presented it to the Water Quality District Board and the county commissioners. So here's where we're kind of at in the timeline, is this committee hearing today. So we're getting there. So now I just want to go through some of the highlights, some of the new things we've added. We've added some new definitions. Probably the most important one, this allowable non-stormwater discharge. This falls into a big category of what it's actually okay to go down the storm drains. And so by listing these out in other municipal code, in stormwater code, and then us referencing that, I think it lets everybody know it's okay if clean drinking water goes down the drain. And so we get a lot of questions about that, irrigation, return water, condensate, things like that are actually okay. So it really helps inform everybody. Large capacity storage tank is a new definition. We have a lot of bulk facilities that store petroleum in Missoula, and we want to differentiate between like Phillips 66 that has these huge tanks versus someone that has a bunch of small tanks. And so there are actually industry standards that are different between those two, and we wanted to separate that out. And that was actually at the request of Phillips 66. So they helped us see that. These are De-Icer tanks, and these would be something that we want to see secondarily contained. So if one of these was to break, it would have a way to be contained and not go into the soil or into our groundwater. De-Icer, this is one of the things we changed on here is we took secondary containment definitions, and there was actually rules written into the definition. So we took it out of the definition and put that more into the code. And so that was a more appropriate place for talking about that De-Icer piece. So prohibited activities, this section was largely rearranged, and we added some new things. So we had prohibited activities throughout the code. One thing that we have in Missoula is we have stormwater MS4 programs in the county and the city. And so we want to clearly define that we don't want to see any illicit discharge or contamination inside the MS4. That doesn't meet that definition I alluded to earlier. And then for gas stations, we talked about these sand and gravel, our aquifer and really permeable soils. We don't want to see gas station spills, like releases of gasoline or diesel, go directly into these 8-foot dry wells. So these are like big straws that go right into the gravel. They're designed to remove stormwater, to remove water so that you don't have puddles, but they're basically a direct conduit to our groundwater. And we do still see gas stations with that kind of drainage incorporated from years ago. It's just not it's just not a protective form of infrastructure. And then, we added a prohibition on connecting a structure like a house to a well if the structure is within 200 feet of an existing public water supply. Currently, the language just says you can't install a new well, but we do realize that wasn't really covering all the cases that we needed it to. In the pollution prevention section, I mentioned BMPs. So basically we needed a place in the ordinance to reference these BMPs, these best management practices. So we added these sections where we actually called out these different categories that we're looking to give more specifics on to the public. And so those two sections are new because of that. For fueling facilities, we basically gave a 2-year timeline for current facilities that do have improper drainage to fix that. And then all the other sections, the existing sections of fueling stations, was moved to the BMP manual like everything else. This is just a photo of basically how to do it right. So these are the tank ports where the large tanker trucks would fill the underground storage tanks at a gas station. And there are all kinds of controls on these to prevent overfilling. A lot of engineering controls like ball float valves and flapper valves and sensors and alarms, but they still fail. There's still a lot of human error involved. We had a case last year where the diesel truck thought they had switched the fill hose to the other port, and so turned on the fuel, but they didn't actually switch hoses, so they started overfilling it. We just had a case last week where they're doing a repair to one of the gaskets down here, and so they needed to shut off the breaker to the pumps, the actual fuel pumps, and they shut off the wrong breaker, and so someone went to fill up their vehicle, and fuel came out everywhere. In that example, though, there were no dry wells at that station, so it was just a surface cleanup, which is super easy and super great. But this is an example of something we would like to see, where the drainage would actually go to this curb cut and then to a grassy swale, and then you can see this beehive cover that prevents direct infiltration into our groundwater. So lots of existing technology for those kind of fixes. So the other, fueling facility BMPs that we added to the manual, the direct drainage on fueling pads, we just gave more options and ideas like containment vaults or oil water interceptors. The tank fueling drainage options is what I was just showing you. Of course, all the BMPs must operate at full capacity during storm events. It's already industry standard to have breakaway hoses and nozzles on dispensers, so we just kept that in there. And then large capacity tank inspections. This refers to like the Phillips 66 large capacity standards, and it just updates the API, the American Petroleum Institute reference. Basically to bring alignment into what the EPA recommends, and to keep the inspections at a safe schedule that Phillips 66 and the district think is wise at this point. I just want to show a couple pictures of fueling facility drainage, because I think it's hard to picture otherwise. This is in 2010. There was a fueling island collision, and the lot drained to an injection well. There's about 2,000 gallons spilled, and this is some of the remediation that had to occur, removing dirt and soil. This is in 2015, an overfill. So that's when you either have an overfill of those underground storage tanks, or overfill of someone's vehicle went right to a storm drain. This is a really concerning location. This spill happened in the wintertime, and there was a drive off, and so I don't know exactly how many gallons spilled, but it came right off the lot into the road, and then that goes right to a storm drain that outfalls directly into Rattlesnake Creek. So that fuel went right into the creek. These are not great ways to manage fueling facilities. Here's another spill. Another thing we do at the Water Quality District is we have an on-call team. So a lot of our call outs can involve responding to these spills. This is just last year. This is a tank overfill due to a failed flapper valve. 3 different injection wells received 100 gallons of gasoline, and they're right adjacent to Grant Creek. So for the De-Icer specs, the one big change there is we required secondary containment for De-Icer, as long as the De-Icer was going to be applied on city or county roads. And that was basically, that wasn't the intent of how we wrote that. but we realized it did read that way. We don't want De-Icer spilling wherever it's stored, regardless of where it's going to go afterwards. So we changed that to make sure it was clear. Whenever you store 1,000 gallons or more, we need to have secondary containment. The pollution prevention permit requirements, we added 2 key things. So if you store hazardous chemicals in our, above our aquifer, we require, at certain quantities, we require a permit. And the permit is basically, how are you going to, prevent spills? How are you going to clean things up if there is a spill? They're basically just pollution prevention plans that we review. Permits are super cheap. They're like $30 every 2 years for big facilities like this one. But 2 things that we didn't have in those permit requirements were a requirement that they actually follow their prevention plan. We required that they submit one, but then we'd find violations with, they didn't do their own internal inspections, or they didn't clean up spills. And we realized that part wasn't in there. So we needed more than just a submittal. And then, chemical companies in Missoula, they change what they do. And when they change that, it changes their risk to the water. And so we wanted to make sure we put a provision in there that to keep us updated when they actually change the chemicals they store, because that can affect a lot in how we provide safety guidance there. So this is the cover of our best management practices manual. These are a number of the new categories, and in a nutshell, the best management practices for carpet cleaning, auto maintenance, livestock waste is don't put it in a storm drain. Don't set it next to a river where it can fall into the river. Don't dump it where you shouldn't dump it. Most of these are very common sense. They're very. I have a lot of confidence that most folks in facilities and activities in Missoula are doing it the right way. But why not put it out there with pictures and descriptions and make it easier on the front end, and also cheaper, because if you invest in prevention, it's much cheaper than a cleanup. So those are the categories we added. Vehicle washing, well development. We still see well development sometimes. Food service, we see grease. I just had a complaint last Friday about grease being dumped in the storm drain. Pressure washing, we do see quite a bit of that. We actually had one of the larger pressure washer companies in Missoula come to us 2 years ago and hand us BMPs that he wanted to see in place, so that all of the pressure washers in town would be kind of held to the same standard. These are just some good examples of why we need better education and BMPs. These are above ground storage tanks. They're both labeled 1203, but one's gas and one's diesel, so those require different labels. Got hoses on the ground, and if they were to spill, it would just go right into the dirt. So that's something we need to help people understand. Painting, striping, asphalt work, concrete cutting, these are all things that could be done better with some that we've had to respond to, that we'd like people to know ahead of time. Sediment, people don't think always that sediment or dirt is a contaminant, but it is. It's very detrimental to river ecosystems and surface water. And so in this case, it was just emptying a hot tub. But we have information about how to do that properly. This is manure laden water running off a property directly down to Patty Creek. We see grease. This is restaurant grease tracked through an alley. And we talked about well development. So well development water, this would be a good thing to do, is to catch that water so that sediment can then be filtered before that water goes into the storm system. This is a storm drain on the curb there, and this is a concrete truck. And the hose is being used to wash that concrete waste into the storm drain, which is just not a best management practice. So we addressed that. There are a few things in the ordinance we removed. The LAPC reporting requirement, as part of the Federal Right to Know Act, we didn't feel like we needed to be redundant on that. We took out the facility closure permits. We've never had one. We've never had a request for one. And there are other rules that address those. Same thing with underground storage tank requirements. That's controlled by the state. So we just simply referenced to be compliant with state rules on those. Right now, we are taking questions and comments on the ordinance. We've sent letters to everyone that has a permit in Missoula. we've had the draft ordinance on our website for the past year, and through Missoula County Voice, very similar to Engage Missoula, we have the B&P manual, the drafts, and a section for questions and comments. So that's all I have. I apologize for the technical difficulties there. Maybe I'll stop sharing.
Great, thanks so much, Todd. Showing those pictures, I was like, what are people doing? We actually had a comment on Monday night during public comment in our general council meeting, asking about water restrictions and the fact that Missoula did not put those in place last summer when a vast majority of municipalities across Montana did in a response to the drought. And I had asked some of those questions last summer, and it was because we had such, our aquifer is so big and we are so blessed for that, but we really, it is, like you said, the source of all of our drinking water. And because of our soils, there's a lot of potential for contamination of that. And what a horrific event that would be if our aquifer was truly contaminated. So we do have a couple questions I queued up from council members. I have a couple questions, but I'll let Miss Cheryl and Miss Becerra go first and second in case they ask mine. Go ahead, Miss Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks so much for that presentation, Todd. I'm laughing. I was thinking about air, and so I'm looking for Ben, and he was probably panicking, thinking he had to talk about water. So sorry about that. I think it does show how specific our expertise of the health department is. And so I really appreciate that. And these presentations always just get me thinking about water quality or air quality issues that I hadn't even thought about. So I really appreciate that time. I have a couple of questions and then a comment as well, if that's okay, Stacy?
Yep,
okay.
That's fine.
Awesome. So let's see. Actually, I guess I just have a couple of questions. Thinking about, I was in a meeting the other day with DEQ and just kind of thinking about the watershed overall. And that we're controlling this small piece of our watershed, and our regulations are controlling a small piece of our watershed. I'm just curious about any collaboration, or I don't expect you to speak to their rules in other counties and things like that, but could you just speak to how that all works? Because we're so thoughtful, and your work is so thorough and getting these regulations in place, and water moves. It moves, and we have to take on their water. So, and someone else has to take on some of ours. So would you speak to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We're not isolated from all the inputs. There are a lot of collaborations between the districts, as well as like DNRC and the Clark Fork Coalition and DEQ. We have a monitoring network throughout Missoula with all the streams and all the inputs that come into our watershed. And there's 2 MS4s in Missoula that are also trying to capture stormwater inputs that we collaborate with into our groundwater, but also into our surface water. On a more regional scale, there's a lot of restoration. A lot of the water quality impacts that we see outside the watershed, have to do with land use, have to do with sediment loading, temperature alterations into our landscape that can affect the quality of, the Clark Fork, the Bitterroot, and those headwaters. And so we've helped groups write grants, 319 grants, and work on identifying what they call, total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, for local waterways. We do have 3 other water quality districts in the state that we work with and we collaborate with each, on an ongoing basis. And yeah, we're just tied to a lot of groups. We have been hosting a Big Sky Watershed member for the past few years, and that's a network of folks that travel throughout the state working on watershed and water issues. As well as with local watershed groups. So like Deb Fossenot and Watershed Education Network, we've worked with her quite a bit, more so in the past than recent, on watershed education. So there's so many groups that are committed, kind of have different skill sets and maybe different missions. But it's absolutely a collaborative effort.
Thanks. Thanks. I'm glad to kind of have that, on the record here. My next question is around the communications plan. And I know that you're obviously, it's a little easier to get information on these new rules and best practices out to kind of people that were gas stations and, people that have big tanks of De-Icer and all those things. So I know, I guess I'm curious for the homeowners and people that are still dealing with all sorts of small amounts of things that could contaminate our aquifer. How are we getting that communication out? Because, that even in my home, I've gone, what do I do with this? Like, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So can we just speak to that a little more? It's so important that everyone, that our individual homes understand how to deal with things that can contaminate our water.
No, absolutely. And that's like the key point that I forgot to mention is that is our biggest source of pollution right now is these non-point sources. So it's 60,000 people washing their cars into the storm drain or applying fertilizer, over applying fertilizer. Our biggest outreach on those kinds of things is probably with household hazardous waste disposal, providing that event each year. Right now we're doing outreach on that because we're changing how we want to do that. There are not many communities that have a water quality district that tries to take household hazardous waste and educate people on how to dispose of it. It's largely a landfill that does that. Or even you'll see more product stewardship with the folks that sell that or manufacture it. We don't really have either of those in Missoula. So what we've kind of come to see over the past few years is that event is just not enough. It's not meeting the demand or the need in Missoula. So we've purchased a large storage container, a large facility that's mobile that is being built as we speak. That we're going to try to use to take year-round household hazardous waste from folks and work with a local nonprofit to do better education on hopefully using established websites and established like zero waste Missoula connectivity to get the information out about disposal is expensive. It costs more to dispose of many of these things than it does to buy them. So we need to use less. We need to use just what we need. Pick non-hazardous alternatives, and then when we do have to absolutely dispose of it, it needs to be a community effort. The water quality district won't be able to finance that 100%, but we definitely want to promote that, and we don't want to see those chemicals dumped down the drain. So we're excited about that. That's a new development, and it's probably going to serve Missoula a lot better than just the once a year event. So.
Great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the presentation and the thoughtfulness that has gone into this.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, next up we have Ms. Becerra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just one comment and a couple of questions, if I may. Todd, thank you so much for all this work. I truly appreciate it. As someone who grew up in a city that's almost 10 times the size of Missoula with tons of unchecked pollution sources, this is really, really important to me, and I appreciate the work that goes into it. I have just a couple of questions. One, it has to do with the ordinance itself. You mentioned that this would go outside of the city limits. So is it just like any of the other public health related ordinances with a 5-mile extraterritorial power into the county? Is that right?
That's how I understand it, yes.
Okay. And then, I think Amber touched on a lot of what my questions were going to be regarding non-point source pollution and how this ordinance is primarily, it is based, it's for commercial and big point source pollution sources. And so I guess I was curious to know what the permitting process is, just in a nutshell. I'm sure it's really complicated, but I'm wondering if it's linked to business license renewal, or like how do we keep making sure that people who the permittees are, is that whoever gets the permit is being checked on, is being, that we're enforcing our ordinance. How does that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just leave it at that because I think Amber covers some of my other questions.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So when a new business is applying for a business license or even change of ownership and it's commercial, we do get notification of that. And so that's when we contact that business owner and say, hey, it looks like you're going to be an auto shop. What are we talking about here? How much used oil are you going to store, et cetera? And we have certain thresholds that require a permit. Thresholds meaning quantities of hazardous substances that require a permit. The nice thing about that, though, is even if they don't store those quantities, we can have that initial conversation about, hey, oh, you're new to town. Oh, okay, so we live on top of our drinking water. So even though you don't have enough to require a permit, here's some good BMPs to think about, But that's one of the main ways we find out about new businesses. I think there are probably some businesses in the county or the city that have been here for a long time that can change their operations where they may have never needed a permit, but now they store, 800 gallons of used oil, and they used to be a small shop. And so that's more of a challenge to find out about those. It's usually through a complaint or we notice, a remodel or something like that, and we get in touch with them. But everyone that currently does have a permit, we would go and inspect them. We keep records of that. The nice thing about this ordinance revision is this wouldn't require any new permits for people that currently aren't permitted. It really doesn't affect those folks, in that way at all right now. So.
Great. And just one last question is, how is this coordinated with our stormwater division? Because I'm assuming this is all part of the MS4 permitting and meeting our regulations. Is this going to fold in or work in tandem with our stormwater division?
Yeah, it's already folded in. So because this ordinance that prohibits pollution was already in place before the stormwater division or the MS4 permit was established, we were able to step in and have a memorandum of agreement with city stormwater and county stormwater to basically be the enforcement arm of their MS4 programs. So you're right, the MS4 requires that they report and detect any illicit discharge, so contamination into the storm system. And so we do that on behalf of both stormwater divisions. So we work really close with Tracy and Shane over at the county. So yeah, we're already well connected. So that's great.
Great. Thank you so much for all this work.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Ms. Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. Todd, I love the message of that we live on top of our drinking water. I think that really, it gets to the idea of not putting bad things down our drains. And I also really like your analogy about a straw to it in lots of different ways. That's really kind of brings the point home. I forgot to make the motion. So I would love to make this motion.
Great, thanks so much, Ms. Cheryl. The motion is in order, and the motion is to set a public hearing for June 6th and preliminary adoption of ordinance generally amending the Missoula Municipal Code Chapter 13.26 for Missoula Valley Water Quality Ordinance. So we currently have no public. We still have one more agenda item, so I'm going to quickly, unless anybody raises their hand, move to a vote on this setting a public hearing for June 6th. Kathy, can you go ahead and take the vote, please?
Starting vote. Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Daniel Carlino,
Yes.
Mirta Becerra,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Kristen Jordan,
Yes.
Mike Nugent,
He had to step out, so he's absent.
Jennifer Savage,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
vote passed, 8 yeses, 0 nos.
Great, thanks so much. All right, great. We will see that in council for a public hearing on June 6th. We have one final agenda item, and I've not done the best job of managing time today, but it is a resolution to support the changes of the Missoula County air quality pollution control. Again, Ms. Cheryl is the sponsor for this, and we have other members of the City County Health Department. So Ms. Cheryl, I'll let you tee up who is presenting on this.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm not totally sure who's planning on presenting. I will say that this item started when I first got on the board in 2000, and then COVID hit, and the health department obviously had their hands full. So this is coming back around to get finalized 2 years later. We had a robust conversation with the health department around these new air reg rules, but I don't know. I'm not totally sure who. I don't see Ben here. It may be Sarah, maybe Shannon. I'm not totally sure. Oh, there he is. Okay.
I'm here.
I'm guessing. Okay. For some reason you weren't coming up on my screen. I'm assuming, Ben, you're going to go ahead and take this. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Yes, we have Ben, Shannon, and Sarah all from the City County Health Department. So Ben, we'll let you start. Thanks.
Oh, thanks for considering this resolution to support revisions to the Missoula City County Air Pollution Control Program. Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just going to give a brief summary of the changes, try to share screen here. Everything's going very slowly on the computer, so. Okay, says I'm sharing screen. Does everyone have that?
Nope, we don't see your screen share.
Okay.
Ooh, it looks like it's starting.
Okay, things are just going very slowly, it looks like. Is it full screen yet? Or?
It is not. It looks like it's in slideshow present. You can see all your upcoming slides on the left. There we go.
Okay, so start. Most of these changes, I should say, are basically cleaning up the rules, fixing errors, grammatical errors, reference errors, that kind of things. A lot of the other changes also, what they do is make our rules consistent with changes to the state and federal rules. So there's a lot of those. So what I'm going to primarily focus on in this limited time I have left is just the substantive changes. What you should be seeing now is a slide of our public outreach on these rule changes that started in 2019. We've been to several community councils, several articles in the Pathfinder up in Sea Lake area due to the fact that our rules have some impact up there outside of city limits, but still an important part of our program is out in the county. So getting on to the substantive changes, one thing we've done in this rule is in chapters 4 and 7 is try to make it so recreational fires are prohibited during air alerts. Now the city already has an ordinance against recreational fires, but outside the city, we have the air stagnation zone, which goes quite a bit outside those city limits, and we would like to prohibit recreational fires when we have air alerts. Right now, our rules actually allow that to go on. People can't heat their homes with wood stoves, yet at the same time they could go out and have a little fire when we're having serious problems with our air quality. That didn't seem quite appropriate. I'd like to point out that burning outside really wasn't as big a thing in the 80s and 90s, but as a nationwide phenomenon now where people just like to hang outside and have fires in the urban areas. So we're trying to address that during these air alert episodes. Chapter 5 of these changes, the first one is what we're trying to do is clarify how the Air Pollution Control Board sets fees for the program. Right now, we've had a process that's been in place for a long time. We've been using that process, and we just cleaned up the language so it makes it clearer how we go about doing those changes to the fees that the program charges. The other thing we did in Chapter 5 is there was a lot of changes in state law on how local air programs can change their local rules. We changed our rules so that they now are consistent with the state requirements. It was a little cumbersome in the past when we had two sets of rules that were different, and we're trying to follow both. So that's the big changes in Chapter 5. Chapter 6 is their industrial chapter. So that deals with industrial permitting, industrial compliance, things like gravel crushers, asphalt plants, small sawmills. Does not include the large facilities like Roseburg. The state Major Facility Siting Act actually prohibits local jurisdictions from having authority over the larger facilities. The one change we did there is we allow the department, or proposed to allow the department to have two 12-month extensions to a permit application for a source to finish construction of a project. The basic reason behind that is due to like potentially legal issues or supply chain issues. Sometimes a source is not able to complete a project in that 36-month period. And as long as nothing has changed, this gives the department a little bit of leeway to say, okay, you can have an extension of that permit to finish the construction of the project. Right now, as I said, the rule specifies that once the permit is given, the source has to have that project completed and up and running in 36 months. Okay. Okay, Chapter 7, two major changes there is that it specifies how major burners are going to be allowed to do burning during the winter months. They are allowed to do that already. This sort of cleans up the rules so that it's clear how that those winter months are totally different and handled totally different method than they are during the rest of the year when we have better dispersion. The other change is that we're allowing, Sarah's the primary person on this chapter, so I'm sort of bumbling through this one a little bit, is basically we're allowing in air curtain burners and air curtain destructors to be used to generate or to burn material that is generated off-site. They're allowed to get a conditional permit to do that. We like air curtain burners and air curtain destructors due to the fact that they actually take woody waste that is in piles being burned, puts them in a device or a container, and has a fan blowing on them, burns much cleaner, reduces pollution to a great degree. And so that's really why we'd like to see that change in Chapter 7 for outdoor burning. Chapter 8, we've already done the change that we're proposing in Chapter 8 through a variance process. What our proposal is that let's say we have a gravel road that's existing. Right now, excuse me, I should back up. Right now, our rules require that new vehicle use areas be paved in the air stagnation zone, parking lots, new roads, new just access ways to businesses or commercial operations. Sometimes we have a situation that occurs where someone's putting a new parking lot off of a gravel road. Well, paving that new parking area when our rules require it has less impact than paving that road. This would allow us to say to the applicant, say, oh, you can pave the road instead of the parking area, something that has a equal or greater impact on improving air quality than paving in that parking area would have given. So that's the intent of that Chapter 8 change, allowing us to allow alternative areas to be paved. Okay, Chapter 9 is our wood stove chapter. This is the one that usually generates the most discussion. Some of the biggest changes we're proposing are from Seeley Lake. We are proposing a Seeley Lake wood stove zone. That's one of the reasons we had so much outreach up in Seeley Lake, just so they would be aware of the proposed changes. What it basically does, it says in Chapter 9 is that in that Seeley Lake wood stove zone, which I have a map up, I'll show you in a second, in that zone, only the cleanest burning devices can be installed. So these are devices that are commercially available. They have to be 2020 compliant, and they have to be at least 70% energy efficient or greater. 70% is a doable mark for a wood stove. Hard to go get much better than that. So this just basically says you have to put clean devices in that area where we have troubles meeting the national ambient air quality standards in the wintertime from wood smoke. And this is the map. Just to give an idea, the blue, of course, is Seeley Lake, and you can see Pyramid Mountain Lumber just to the south of that lake. And of course, the elementary school is sort of like where the thumb of the lake is pointing sort of at that, a little above that thumb of the lake, and that's where the air monitor is. Okay. The other rule change in Chapter 9 is that we would like to propose that all wood stoves need to be removed upon change of ownership in the Missoula air stagnation zone. Right now, if you had installed a Class 1 device between 1986 and 1994, when a property is sold, that device could stay. We're saying enough time has passed. Our population continues to grow in the valley. The amount that we can each generate is getting smaller as more people are added. And so it's time to say that just any wood stove needs to be sold or removed, even these Class 1 devices, when a property changes ownership. Another change is we've been requiring certificate of compliance forms since 1994. Basically what that is a form that was filled out and submitted to the clerk and recorder's office when a property was sold for the first time. Right now, that's becoming sort of an onerous process. So few properties have wood stoves to begin with. They have not been legal to install since 1994. Most wood stoves have been removed. There are still many out there, but most have been removed. And you can see that in our air quality in Missoula, how it's improved since the 1980s and 1990s. So instead of having a certificate of compliance, which has sort of gone through its useful lifespan, we're going to replace that with working with the realtors and other groups on a voluntary educational effort, and also developing a disclosure form that we hope will slowly catch on, where it's disclosed to people who are buying and selling homes or property that any wood stove that's on the premises does need to be removed. Chapter 10 deals with the oxygenated fuels program. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but we have been required since the early 1990s to have oxygenated fuel. It's ethanol for us in Missoula since 1991. Oxygenated fuel really doesn't have the impact on air quality it did in the early 1990s. It's a program that we feel can be phased out. It has no great air quality benefits. What this change does in Chapter 10 is it says when we get authorization from the state and the federal government, we can cease our oxygenated fuel requirements in the Missoula urban area. Chapter 14 just clarifies that after an administrative review process, a person who disagrees with that process has 15 days to request a hearing before the Air Pollution Control Board. That's been the standard that's always been in place and we use when we give out the administrative decision. And that letter they would give would always specify they have 15 days. We're just codifying what has been the practice. Okay, so this is just a review of the steps to how an air pollution control program rule is changed. We go to the Air Board first, and then after that, it gets sent to both the City Council and the Board of County Commissioner, and that's the stage we're at right now, that second and third bullet. And we'll eventually work our way through having a meeting with the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, and then sending the rule package, all of the documents that also go with that rule package to Montana DEQ for approval. And then at that stage, there's going to be decisions have to be made on how much is going to be submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency for review and potentially inclusion into the state implementation plan. So that's sort of the rule change in a nutshell. Hopefully you have the documents that we sent with this.
Okay, thanks, Ben, for that speedy overview of the significant changes. Looks like you guys have been working on this for quite some time, and appreciate you bringing it back to us. We have Miss Cheryl up in the queue.
Yeah, thanks. So, we moved here in 2000. I think I said I was on the board since 2000. That's not true. I've been on the board since 2020. I have a glitch in my brain about that 2020 being 2000. But at that point, the air stagnation zone had already been established, and we were very fortunate to move here in a time that the air quality had already improved significantly in the winter in Missoula. So I do have one question, but wanted to just say, that we at the health board did have a pretty robust discussion around these rules. We discussed, the allowance of new technologies as they come online and get better. We also discussed the listing of CO2 as an air pollutant. That was a very interesting one. I don't know if we have time to continue any of that at this point. Stacy, I think maybe you can make that call based on the timing that we have. It was an interesting conversation about listing that. We can't do that right now, but and I'm just curious, when was the air stagnation zone established, Ben?
Sometime around 1985, 1986. I'm not sure the exact year though.
Yeah, so 15-ish years later, when we moved here, there was a significant improvement from what I understand in the air quality in this valley. So yeah, glad we did that. And I would be happy to make this motion. And I don't know what other, if we have time for the further conversation or not, but you could also watch the health department board meeting if anyone's interested in understanding that more.
Thanks so much, Ms. Cheryl. That motion is in order. We have about 4 minutes left today, and I want to be mindful of time because we just have such a jam-packed day. We are setting the motion. The motion is to set a public hearing for the 6th. We can absolutely have this back in committee either before the 6th of June or in that week between June 6th when we open a public hearing and the following week when we adopt it. So if there is interest in more robust discussion and more committee time, I'm happy to make that available, but just would love to be on time today. Ms. Cheryl, you were about to raise your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that's fine. I think the discussion at the health department was thorough regarding this issue. I just thought it was really interesting. So I bring it up for any council people or the public that might want to further understand what is listed as a pollutant in there.
And what health department meeting should, if folks want to go watch that discussion, should they reference? I'll let Ms. Becerra speak until you and give you a chance to figure that out.
Okay.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. I'll be really quick. Ben, thank you for all your work on this. And I bet you know what I'm going to ask, but I'm wondering where in the air pollution control program I can find information or how air pollution due to development, construction, mass grading is addressed, or is that addressed somewhere else, or what are we doing besides? Are there any new potential steps that we can take to control or regulate that?
Though that is addressed as fugitive emissions in Chapter 8. And basically what our rules say is that reasonable measures must be taken by sources to control fugitive dust from occurring. Now, that doesn't mean no dust. It just means they must take reasonable measures. Cost is a factor in that. I will say that reasonable measures based on state standards, what's happened in the past, clearly involve water application, magnesium chloride, sweeping of streets as needed. When you start taking a whole area and grading it, that's sort of, it's just hard to address by our rules because cost is such a factor. Anyway, that's a complicated discussion, which I'll try to keep short here.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Ms. Becerra, and I appreciate you bringing that up because it is something that especially you have gotten a lot of correspondence from constituents on. And I'm just wondering if, since we're taking this opportunity to update our rules around air quality, if we shouldn't be looking a little bit more at this because we are seeing so much fugitive, I love that, dust in certain areas, especially out in the subtucane area because of the types of soils. And there is so much more development planned for there that I think it will continue to be a problem. So Miss Cheryl might have the committee meeting that we should all go back and watch.
It's just the April Health Department board meeting.
Okay, great.
Find that on the county website.
All right, so we're gonna have a vote to set the public hearing, and then I can work with council members and health department staff to see if we want to schedule an additional committee time for this, for any further discussion in between now and final adoption. So Kathy, if you could help us with the vote on setting the public hearing for June 6th, I would appreciate it.
Stacey Anderson,
Yes.
Daniel Carlino,
Yes.
Mirza Becerra,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Kristen Jordan,
Yes.
Jennifer Savage,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
vote passes 8 yes, 0 no's.
Thanks so much. Shannon, I see you quickly have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that the council is clear on what we're asking for. And so this is different than a city ordinance. And so the Air Pollution Control Board adopts the Air Pollution Control Program and then brings it to the city and to the county for concurrence. And so if you say this is an important change that we make to the rule, I just want you to know that it'll go back to the Air Pollution Control Board. So it's not a city ordinance, it's an Air Pollution Control Board function. It doesn't mean that that can't happen. I just wanted to be clear on it's different from the water quality ordinance, which is a city ordinance, and which, there's likely going to be changes through that process. So
that is super helpful procedural information. We appreciate that. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Okay, thanks for that. All right, just 2 minutes over, so we're doing pretty good for the start of the day. I will adjourn today's public safety and health and operations meeting, and we'll see you at 9:25 for public works and mobility. Thank you everyone for the presentations and discussions.